All right, Justin, hold on. Give me 1 second. I got to re-add Mike.
Yeah.
This is exactly what I was talking about.
Does that
It'll,
happen often?
not always, but it'll be like once every couple of episodes. It'll just randomly be like, "Oh, you've been talking for long enough. Hey, Mike, you're back."
Oh yeah, already crashed. We're starting off solid.
Yeah. So this is why we do a little bit of editing. But okay, so I'll just kind of start back over. Welcome back, everybody, to Mid Tier Thoughts. Today we're joined by my cousin Justin. We're gonna be. I got Michael on here too, so we got all three of us on here. The audio might sound a little weird because I'm not using a headset this time. So with that, we're gonna be talking about God, guns, and government, and the role that they all play with each other, and um, kind of a seeing, for regardless of where you're at on the religious spectrum. I think this will be an interesting talk for you guys to and bring up a lot of good points and things to think about. So with that, Justin, if you yourself with whatever you want to say about yourself before we really dive in.
Yeah, I mean, my name is Justin. What I spend my day hours doing, I guess. I'm a medical billing manager, so not really anything to do with guns or God or government in really any way. But this is a topic that's very close to my heart, and understanding more and more about how the role of God, how he works in and through all of the aspects of our government, and how the intention of those who founded our government and the principles of our constitution had a strong desire for the role of God to be high in everything that we accomplish and do. Um,
Interesting.
so that's really, I mean, that's the main reason why I'm even wanting to have this conversation with you guys today.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And on the contrary, sir, you're a United States citizen and you love your family, you love your rights that you have. So I would say you have very much to do with a lot about guns.
Thank you.
so yeah, for those that aren't aware, like we kind of on me and my cousin Justin had a very interesting conversation that kind of spurred this idea. And Mike coincidentally hit me up and wanted to talk about the same thing. So and then kind of to again, kind of how Justin was explaining what role does God play, if any, in our government, and inspire ideas that we have of our American government, as well as kind of a biblical defense for the Second Amendment and a few other things from a religious perspective on things that are happening in our country, and kind of dive into it and see, like I said, I think it'll give a lot of people a lot to talk about. So, um, I guess where do we want to kick off, the guys? I know I'm kind of interested in hearing your take, Justin, on a biblical defense for the Second Amendment.
Yeah, well, actually, like, if you don't mind, I'll start us out with just
Yeah, go ahead.
one of my personal beliefs, but I do believe that there should be some sort of separation between the government and your religious preferences. So if you could tell me why that you don't feel that way.
Okay, so you're talking more of the Thomas Jefferson separation of church and state.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I'm not sure about the Thomas Jefferson. I'll be honest with you. I haven't done a ton of personal research into the subject of like, oh, why, who else feels this way, or why people feel that there should be a separation. I know I have my own personal beliefs and my own
Sure.
personal reasoning for it, but I would love to hear some of your personal stuff because I mean
Yeah.
that's what we talk. That's why we have so many people in this state in this country. Is having different ideas is
That's a
what
good
really makes it strong.
it's a good place to start, I think, because I think there is a conception of most people today, even Christians. I count myself to be like a born again believer. I'm a Christian. That's how I was born and raised. That's my confession. That's what I believe. And uh, and even amongst Christians, self-professing, they would say that there should be sort of a neutral state. So like that there should be neutrality in our government and how the government operates. What's interesting to me is that the whole idea of the separation of church and state appears nowhere in our United States Constitution. It's not anywhere in the Federalist Papers. It's not anywhere to be found in our governing document. It was Thomas, a letter written to him by a group of Baptists in Connecticut. And the reason that they were writing to him is because Connecticut, as a state, had a state church that they said that if you want to live in Connecticut, you have to participate in this specific kind of church. And these Baptists were not part of that denomination, not part of that specific church, and so they were making an appeal to Thomas Jefferson, asking for there to be some kind of a response by the government that says, you can't establish a state church, you can't establish a church that has a to make everybody else conform no matter what their personal beliefs. And so the idea of separation of church and state has Christian overtone. It's the idea that the entire United States at the time, right, 13 colonies becoming states, have a strong Christian backbone. But also you have multiple denominations that sort of make up the United States at that time, and the government, the federal government, having very much a hands-off sort of perspective when it comes to state rights and state constitution, is essentially saying we're not going to establish a United States church like you come from England, where you have the Church of England, or you go from Roman Catholicism in Italy, or the Lutheran Church in Germany. Those kind of things are sort of state-run churches. So that's really kind of where that whole idea even comes from. But I mean, so I guess, does that answer some of the some of what I'm saying? I guess why I think that the role of God plays in government is really because the people who founded our nation came over for the purpose of worshiping and serving God freely in a new land. So the Pilgrims and a lot of the first comers to the United States from England or from Europe are really coming to establish a free state that allows them to worship God, but in the context of Christianity, which is what a lot of those people, I mean, practically all of them had been born out of and born into.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I would say that is completely, like, absolutely correct. Like, most of the people that did come here, they came here for the sole fact of religious freedom, which is, and all the founding fathers, most of them, everything being descendants or being part of the first colonies, anything like that. I feel like religion did have a huge factor in that, and in writing the Constitution and everything else going on.
Well, and it's the idea even of the Bill of Rights, right? So you have the United States Constitution, which as a document also doesn't mention the name of God anywhere in it. He is not mentioned by name in the founding document of our country, not because they didn't want God to be a part of the way that we run, but because he's so inundated in the very life, everything that the people did, 7 days a week, 365, God is sort of inundating all of the different parts of life. So saying that you have to specifically mention him in the government. But sorry, to get back to the Bill of Rights and the whole idea of these 10 amendments made to the United States Constitution, even those, and the Second Amendment is the one we wanted to talk about today, their root in the Christian ethic, right? The Christian West. And so, even the very idea that you can have amendments that dictate, to the government, not to the people, right? These are not rights that the government is giving the citizens of their country. It is specifically right that.
Don't worry, we'll fix it all in editing.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
so the last place you were talking was the 10 Amendments you were saying something about the 10 Amendments.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were based in Christian ethics.
Yeah, based in Christian ethics. The first 10 amendments of our Constitution are based in something that we can talk about this a little bit more, but it's based in the common law, which comes out of uh, how far back in history do you want to go? It goes back to King Alfred the Great, the first English king that united the nation of England, and then into the signing of the Magna Carta in the 13th century. So a lot of those rights and laws, but the question I wanted to ask you guys, as we talk about this and understanding that the Christian ethic is what formed those first 10 amendments, and understanding that those rights that are provided for in the 10 amendments are not necessary, that well, not even necessarily, they're not rights that are gifted to the citizens by the government. They are literally rights that the government is told to keep their hands off of, which is a completely different thing. So doesn't um, if government doesn't give those rights, then where do those rights come from? Is the question. And I just
Mm.
throw that up to you guys. What do you guys think?
Ooh, Austin, you got a first thing on it?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm in agreement with Justin on this one. That I think there's a reason why we say that they're your God-given rights. Is I think that if they're inalienable and you are born with them, then they come from whatever created you, right? Not meaning your parents, but meaning that you are born into this world with these rights that they can only then be gifted by God, and it's the government's job to ensure that your rights are not um, trampled on. They're there to protect the rights, not to take them from you, but just to basically, like you said, take their hands off, say, these are things we can't touch. They are given to you, from birth, and that our job is just to make sure that no one takes them away from you.
Right.
Yeah.
That's my take on it. What do you got, Mike?
So, with everything in mind, yeah, absolutely, these are rights that are given to you not through the government, but through just being a free person of the state, of the whole country of the United States of America. To expand on it, I don't know. I mean, back in the day, you can't really say that religion wasn't a part of everything, because that was life back in the back in our past, or in human history. If you look through all the past, that religion is hardcore, deep rooted in every single thing that we did daily. So of course, when they're writing the Constitution, they're writing these laws, they're writing amendments, that God was a big factor in all of it, because it wasn't even a thing of question. It wasn't like, oh, are you religious, are you Christian? It was, you are. There is no you aren't. So with it having its place in the government, I really don't think so. And the reason why I think that way is that it just expands with time. Back in the day, also, when they were writing these things and stuff like that, they never thought that the United States would be as big as it was, or what it stands for, or what it's become over time, and how much of a world power it has truly became. So a lot of other religions, other belief styles, other ways of living are kind of excluded when you think of it, like still in that main Christian themed government that still exists. So I think it needs to expand and have a separation, because let's say your religious preferences doesn't quite line up with mine. I don't believe that either of those people are less of United States citizens. They have less amendments than I do, or less of anything. Um, that it needs to be more of, hey, you're a free person of the country, that you are entitled to all of these rights, not through God, but through being lucky, basically. Like, all of us who are born in the United States are the most lucky people on this planet. Drawing that lottery ticket and being blessed with having the rights that you're born with, that are instilled with you by being born on this land.
So, and I hear what you're saying there, and it's interesting to me because and I know Austin's own testimony on and what he believes in those things,
Mm-hmm.
and I wonder if he would agree with me on this, because I think from a perspective of somebody who may not be, um, religious or have a confession of faith,
Yeah.
would definitely see that as, just being, something that, kind of the luck of the draw. Like your parents lived here, your grandparents lived here, or somebody emigrated here from your history, and just, here you are. But, the way that the founders talked about this land and the people who would inhabit it, they were, they call it the grand experiment. They saw this as being God's sovereign hand of grace being given to a people to take a place, take a land that, that had, a lot of fertile land, a lot of places to grow and to expand, and basically see it as a blessing God would give to them and to the rest of the world as long as they could keep it. And so having that mindset of God's blessing and God's sovereign hand, it provides more of a mentality of ownership, I guess,
Mhm.
to people who hold that viewpoint, because, we're stewards of a land if it's given to us. If it's just a matter of chance or luck or happenstance, then we kind of get to, you know, and I'm not saying this of you necessarily, but I think if you look around and you see a lot of the craziness and madness that's happened in our country
Yeah.
over the last several decades, you sort of have this mentality that tries to strip God away from that that high place in their minds, to just sort of being random, and people don't have purpose or don't have, the hand of God. Basically, there starts to be slippage, and people start to, they don't appreciate as much what they've been given.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting to me that we have, I think this mindset today of really a lack of gratitude, because it kind of goes hand in hand with the secularization of our society, where, um, the Christian worldview, the Christian, message, right? Even the very gospel itself is centered on self-sacrifice, right? Jesus
Mhm.
Christ died on the cross for your sins and mine, and then we receive that in humility as undeserving people who have done, evil things. We've done wicked things, and then we believe on that for salvation, and then that transforms us into a people who are grateful to a loving God. And so all that we do from that point on becomes a matter of sacrifice, love, responsibility, taking more ownership of what you've been given because it matters. Those kind of things. I'm not saying those things don't exist outside of the Christian church,
Yeah. Yeah.
but if they do, I will say it's because they borrow heavily from it,
Hmm.
because of the history of our land and our country.
Yeah.
Well, and I would say to a certain extent as well, um, no, regardless of whatever country you live in, right, that there's going to be a certain amount of cultural influence, regardless of the level of, the level to which a religion is practiced in that country. For just juxtaposition that, comparing this again against like another religion like Islam, for example. Depending on where you are in the Middle East, if you're going to live there, you have to at least have, you need to have a considerable understanding of the tenets of the religion of which you live under, as they influence the law and the culture and the norms and what's generally accepted and what's not, regardless of how secular that country is. A lot of of its influence and its history comes from that, and it's going to enforce cultural norms based upon that. And
Yeah.
so, same idea with coming to the United States to a certain extent, regardless of whether you believe it or not, to have at least an understanding that is, this is what the belief system is. This is why it may be important. And this is why these things were influenced by it. To understand that, I think, is a significant part of understanding, like answering the question of how we got to where we are as a country, or like, oh, it answers the why of like, why is America a thing? And I think like or what America is can be kind of summed up in some of that cultural part of it.
Yeah.
And having at least a certain level of understanding of that, to understand like, hey, what are the main cultural tenets of this, um,
Yeah.
and I think that plays an important role of understanding that. And so I think that when it comes to the idea of the separation between church and state, I think, to use a bit of a cliche, our First Amendment offers guarantee the freedom of religion,
Hmm.
and a lot of people look at it at the freedom from religion, meaning that we need to kick every religion out of everything, and we need to have nothing but secularism, right? And we need to have a completely neutral, no religion at all in any kind of government. But at the same point, even someone who's an atheist, you could easily argue atheism itself being its own religion.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like you can't. It's impossible to kick it entirely out.
Yeah.
It's just kind of the thing I want to put out there. To a certain extent, one religion or another, one belief system or another. And at this point, I would even argue that like being woke or like leftism has become its own humanistic style religion.
Oh,
On the like a lot of the lefty woke stuff, and
yeah.
so that
That's
I
pretty
would
crazy.
argue that would be like a when we look at history with like different areas having competing religions, and one of them one of them wins out, like the Vikings, they used to be super hardcore pagans, and then they were, Christianity came in and took over. In other parts of the country world, Islam took over, or Hinduism or whatever. That if you have the complete separation of any religion, that we would recognize as religion, but you have this kind of wokeism coming in, it's just going to replace Christianity with that.
Yeah.
Which
And that's just my thing. And I think that as a whole, I think regardless of whether you believe um, in the how am I going to word this? Regardless of whether you believe in Jesus or in God, I think the tenets of morality put forth in the Bible give us the basis of what the morality that we all recognize in America as what's good and what's bad.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
one of my favorite quotes of the founders was John Adams. He said that our Constitution, that our style of government, that our very laws and the things that govern our land are for a moral and a just people. So if you take away, and in the framework that he said that in was a Christian framework, if you take that away, then you will lose all of it, because so let's talk about these amendments. Let's talk about the Second Amendment and the fact that these things come from God. And if you go down to 9 and 10, Amendments 9 and 10, it talks about the common law, because what happens is, in a free state, in a free country like the one that we founded in 1776, it had very few federal laws on the books for a reason. And that's because the Ninth and Tenth Amendment that state that if the federal government doesn't have a law about it, the Constitution doesn't have a law about it, then it reverts back to the states. And if there's no state law on a topic, then it reverts to common law. And the basis of common law is the scriptural law. So the Bible, which every person, right, if you become educated in the 18th and 19th centuries, you're being educated on the scriptures, on the Bible. You're being taught right and wrong, morality, good versus evil from that perspective. And if you have a people that believe that, then what happens is your federal government has very little to do with policing your populace, because it's not a matter of, are they doing more wickedness because we don't have enough laws. It's the people really believe the things that they read in the scriptures and they obey them. And so your federal government has very little to do to keep that in check.
Yeah.
But if you flip that around and you start taking God away from education, you start stripping the Bible out of the public education system, all of a sudden you have a very unruly pagan populace start to come up who do bad things because they haven't been taught what is good and true and beautiful, what is moral and righteous. So all of a sudden now the government decides, well, we have to step in here and we have to make more laws. So I mean, we're in Washington State, right, where in our last legislative session, our governor signed bills that massively overreached on government power when it comes to the issue of a citizen being able to arm himself, as well as many other laws. And he feels right to do that because he is a secularist humanist, that it is up to him and his government to make you a good and moral person. And so he does whatever he sees fit and is just in his eyes, which means you're going to do evil things if you have a gun in your hands, versus a Christian mindset that says you may have a weapon, but that weapon does not instantly make you a criminal or a murderer or somebody who will use it to harm others, because you are ruled and governed by a greater authority, and that being God.
And if I could step in real quick too, I think one of the things, just to kind of what my it too, is I think sometimes the fear is that the fear of having more God in government that people have, I think, is they think back to like medieval Europe with the way the Catholic Church ran and how the church eventually became the state. And some things, for example, certain things were done in the name of God that were not of God, that were terrible things. And so I think that that's one of the general fears. And I think, however, that with that, going back to my argument before about like wokeism, I think that in the name of whatever cause you're going for, right, people are going to do what they want to do and find the cause that they think will justify it. In this case, wokeism or leftism, bringing about, not just for example, the assault weapons ban here, but also the state passed a law, Washington State passed a law that if your child believes that they are a different gender and you are a non-affirming parent, the state can step in and take your child from you and not have to tell you where they are or how to get them back. That was a law that was passed there. And so I think, again, like this is, in my eyes, is a terrible thing being done in the name of a cause, and that we're supposed to have these checks and balances on our government that unfortunately I think are not used very often. But I think that the whole idea is that if we have those checks and balances, right, as well as the general assumption being if everyone was following the same or similar moral code, there were certain things that would just be generally considered unacceptable and other things that would be generally considered acceptable that we wouldn't have to regulate by law, because everyone would have the similar or same moral framework to understand that, like, these things are bad, these things are good, these are things we don't do. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, it was really well worded. The biggest fear I think with a lot of people is the whole church running the government. It's a scary thought because we saw it. It obviously didn't work. People were doing things in the name of God and absolutely just running whatever they wanted. They're doing whatever they wanted. That's not. I mean, that is true. But another big thing for me is that, yes, there's different political views and different religious views in that in turn. So with politics being involved, there are some laws being passed that obviously if you're a Christian or if you're Catholic, if you're Mormon, whatever it may be, you're not going to be cool with. And absolutely, I mean, you shouldn't be cool with it. If your religion says it's not right and it's not right, you believe in that, I 100% believe it is your right to not believe in that, to not want that. I didn't want anything to do with the assault weapons ban or anything like that. It happened. I'm not out in the streets shooting things up because I'm angry about it or anything like that. The only thing you can do is take legal action, and try to get it back to the way that you believe it should be. But I mean, yeah, you can go.
Sorry, to jump in, I think that, the question that I would ask, and I try and ask a lot, is by whose standard? Because the question, for the framers of our Constitution, which, if we're gonna bank on any sort of like, um, any kind of power coming from those first 10 amendments that we hold really really dearly, if that has any power at all, the framers and the founders, the standard of right and wrong was greater than themselves. So the Constitution is meticulously written to put all of the authority and why the laws are that the way that they are, because they saw God and the scriptures as the highest authorities, even greater than themselves and greater than any person who would rule. So when you look at our government today, and this is both parties. Like we've so deteriorated from that mindset as a society that we're not even playing the same game anymore. We're on to another form of government altogether that probably closer ties into French Revolution, you know,
Yeah.
uh, pre Napoleon than we actually do what the framers were talking about. And right now the standard is right or left. The standard is, what moral framework do you work with, and do you have enough people backing you to get power in order to pass laws that align with your worldview? So it changes, right? It changes every 4 years. It changes every decade because people change and their opinion on things changes. And so right now people are playing all kinds of craziness with our laws, and actually doing the one thing, like when we started talking about this, that the framers said, don't touch these 10 things. These 10 things are not for you to do, government. When you see no government shall make no law, right, prohibiting the use of, prohibiting the right to bear arms. Like, no law means no law. And yet, like, if you go 50 states, I guarantee you, more than half of them put laws on the books, maybe even within the last calendar year, prohibiting or restricting the rights of people to bear arms.
Yeah. That could go all the way back to the point of when God and country were pretty close together, all the way back to like Reagan or anything like that, where gun laws were being instilled, the assault weapons bans, things like
I mean, we
that.
can go back
We're
further
still
to
gonna
the
pass.
NFA, man. We could go back to the NFA,
Yeah. So I
in
feel
the
like
30s.
the whole having the 10 amendments, and they wrote that, and they had God in mind for it. I don't think there's anything that we could have done in between any of that with God in mind or not that wouldn't have made these men prohibit our rights.
Well, and I think you're right, because it's really hard to hold on to the ideals that they were founding this country on.
Yeah.
Because it really quickly, you know, uh, something that's really powerful and successful, right? I mean, America became like the jewel of the Western world pretty quickly. Like, you have somebody like de Tocqueville coming over and saying, like, how on earth have they managed to make such a prosperous nation in such a short amount of time? Like, the world sees America as this really like great thing, and of course it's going to draw people purposes who want to, like, take a piece of that pie and start to kind of work their own perspective, or work their own way into it. So, um, there's a hijacking of the American government by people who don't see God as the highest authority. And so, and what I'm trying to say with all this is not trying to hammer you over the head with God or anything, but like just understand, like when he stops being the authority that governs your laws, then everybody, it's open season, and everybody can make laws that they deem appropriate and that they think make the most sense. And all they need is a slight majority to start passing things, you know,
Yeah.
right through.
Yeah,
That's
I think there's a.
Mhm.
I would say there's a certain level of, if you have a general group of people who generally believe that like these laws are written in the sense of like God is the highest authority. If we go against these, we're going against him. That that general mindset then for the people the people in governing or in governance, the people that are governing the country at the time would say, okay, we don't want to screw with these because we believe that like these are divinely inspired, so we're not going to mess with it. But then you get people in who are not of that mindset, who are like, who's in charge? I want to be the guy in charge. I want to be the high authority here. So don't listen to God, listen to me, right? As to the idea of like stripping these things away for power because they're not holding themselves to that higher authority because they don't believe in that higher authority. So they're saying there is no other higher authority other than me. So I'm going to do what I want at the cost of other people. As I kind of think, and that's where my mind kind of goes with thinking like that of some of the nefarious people, especially who've gotten into government with that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I'm a big person on humanity. So morals, absolutely, they are deep rooted in religion, no matter what, no matter which way you put it. Good versus evil, bad, good, dark, light. No matter how you do it. I mean, even the Lord of the Rings, you can look into that and see deep rooted like religion in writings and books and television and everything. But I'm a big humanity person. A long time ago, in a far, far place, it was all right to own people, and it was all right to do things in the name of God. It was okay to sell your daughter for certain things. It was okay to do a lot of things in the name of God because it was okay in the Bible. So I'm not saying that religion's bad at all. I'm actually a big fan of religion. I had the privilege of having a ton of religions in my lifetime. My grandmother from Japan, she was Buddhism. She believed in Buddhism, so I actually got to experience in Buddhism. My other grandmother on my dad's side, she's Mormon. My dad is Christian. My grandpa's Catholic, so it's a big throw around. So they didn't like the religion, they went to a different religion. They didn't like the religion, they went to a different religion. So I got to experience a bunch of them. And religion has the best group of community, has the best group of people that I've ever met in my life that all just wanted to do the right thing, to do the right thing. Yes, I do believe that exists outside of religion, and that's why I'm saying that the government needs to be less religion and more humanity-based morals. Because yeah, I do have a lot of crazy ideas out there. Some people have even said I was kind of a rhino. So a rhino's like Republican and Democrat, both of it. I just believe in what I believe in, and the fact that some people say that it's not okay and some people do say it's okay, that's your right as an American citizen, and I strongly believe in that.
Yeah. So let me ask you just a quick one question, um, because this all boils down again to by whose standard. If because I think that all of us, if we could, we would want every person to feel welcome to live here, and the laws that have been put in place here, and all of these things. But understand that, like, when you start melting all of these different worldviews into one pot, who gets to decide which worldview govern? Because is it possible? This is my question. Is it possible to have a society where varying and even contradicting worldviews live?
Yes.
And I
Oh, I'm sorry, Austin, you go.
oh I was saying, well, I think that's 100% exactly what we're seeing right now. Is people talk about the idea of national divorce, people talk about the idea of civil war, people talk about the country never having been more divided than it's ever been, And I think that whether it's conservative versus liberal, religious, non-religious, whatever it is, that I think to a certain extent that I think you can have a certain level of amounts of people living together, but I think at a certain point in any society, depending on how large those groups are, depending on the how varying those differences are. Like it's one thing that if you were like, yeah, 80% of the people believe this, 20% believe a mixture of other things, not a problem. But if you get to closer to the 50-50, I think the problem with that is when you have half of a country or half of a nation that believes one thing and half of a nation that believes another, and they believe it so deep rooted and entrenchedly that it's like this is who they are, and they are absolutely contradictory to each other. Um, I think that if you can't reconcile those differences, I think that leads to a collapse. I mean that's a house divided cannot stand. So I think to a certain extent, yes, but I think that it depends on the amount of influence each side has. Like I said, if one group is 80% and the other is 20, right? The odds of everybody getting by probably okay. The closer you get to 50-50, no.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even uh, anyone who says that the country's never been divided as much as it is now like, no, it's not. I mean, we're not out in the middle of the field wearing blue and gray coats right now. So like, we got a little bit further to go. But absolutely, there needs to be some sort of controversy. There needs to be a little bit of separation in people and in the way we believe and in our beliefs, because that's what makes us so strong. What makes us so strong as a nation is that all these people can have different beliefs, can have different things going on that they truly set their soul on, and we all still can live in harmony in this country. There needs to be a little bit of tit for tat. Right now it's absolutely ridiculous. It's all just a big ploy. It's just a smoke show, because there's never in the history of the state, in the country, has there been two divided sides. You're either left, you're either right. There's a line in the sand. You don't cross that fucking line. You know what I'm saying? Um, so that's what's making it so hard for everyone to find common ground in anything we do nowadays. I do believe that there can be two different beliefs, but that's also up to me. There'd be a smaller government, and then that's up to the states. So if certain states want to ban abortion, or they want to have abortion, I think that should be up to the states to decide that.
Yeah, so I think that if I were to simplify my question, can you have two sets of laws for two sets of morally distinct people and call it a single nation?
Federally, no, I don't believe so.
And I to add to your point though, even about like the state rights and those kind of things, like with up to a point, like you can have some distinction between states, but if you can't, so like probably, I don't know how deep we want to go into the abortion debate, but let me just say you have one set of people who look at abortion as being a moral right and something that people should have access to freely because of their own personal autonomy. And then you have another group of people who see the life being taken in the womb as a
Murder.
human,
Yeah.
and it's a murder, right? So these are not just a matter of differences of opinions. These are different ways of looking at the world, looking at humanity, looking at who says what is human and what isn't. Like all of those arguments betray a deeper fault line than just like we disagree and have difference of opinion. And that's kind of what I'm trying to get at is, you know, we as a nation, we're willing to bring people from pretty much any walk of life in to a free society and say, you know, make a life for yourself here. But
Mm-hmm.
here are the tenets that we live by. And what we've done slowly over time is eroded those tenets to say, well, there are none. And so, you know, in what world can somebody, and I'll just use a couple of examples. So Christianity, right, has a very specific ethic and morality when it comes to um, marriage, when it comes to family, when it comes to right and wrong, civil, state law, those kind of things. But you take somebody who's born in India, who's Hindu, and they have a completely different set of rules, right? I mean, from India and Hinduism, you get the caste system, which is basically a set of like rigid, like you don't mess with people from this caste, right? You don't you if you know the whole idea of reincarnation, all of these things, and they start to butt heads against Christianity and Christian worldview.
Yeah.
The only way that you end up being able to preserve any kind of even a sort of like uneasy truce is you have to say, okay, we're going to take the passage of laws out of your hands, Christian, and we're going to take the passage of laws out of your hands, Hindu. What's left? Who's left? The government. The government says, okay, now we're making the rules and we're the ones that dictate morality. And we say, it doesn't matter what your God says. It doesn't matter what your God says or your scriptures or your writings. All that matters is what we say. And so there's this uneasy truce. Well, what that becomes is ancient Rome, because so Rome is really interesting because Rome starts to assimilate all of these cultures into itself as this massive empire. And they let people maintain their own systems of worship. They say, worship whatever gods you want. Your culture is your culture. The only thing that they required is that you bend the knee to Caesar and cry and say Caesar is Lord. Because of that, they managed to maintain power and say, we make the laws that govern the land. And that is sort of exactly what has happened today in our country is that we have a group of nobles or aristocrats, you could even call them, a political class of people who are born and raised and educated in this sort of doctrine of that politicians are to run everything, and then they just begin passing the laws that they deem best, and they've taken God out completely. And we say, great, because now we can coexist, right? We can live with our Hindu neighbors, or we can live with our Jewish neighbors, or our Buddhist neighbors, or whatever. Except for now, the ones that are holding the keys, the ones that are holding the steering wheel, are people in power who are unwilling to relinquish it. And all they do is grab more and more and more, because that's human nature.
Wow. That's super profound. That's a really interesting topic, man. It's really eye-opening.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to look at it from this perspective, because I think that regardless of what your thoughts are on God or where you're at in that in that part of life, there is a certain strength to telling the government that, like, hey, or even having if you had the culture of the people in government to say, hey, there is a higher power higher than me, and I have to answer for the things I do. I guarantee you that if the people in Congress truly believed that, our laws would look a lot different. If they truly believed that they had to answer in the end of their life for the things they had done in their life, I think we would have a much different government than what we have today if people still believed that. And I think that's the thing, is that, like, if you get a lot of, kind of going back to what the founding fathers said about how this is meant for a moral and just people, if you get people in power who are only seeking their own power and only seeking to benefit themselves, and they don't have the mindset to actually help others, then of course the government is only going to continue to grow, because its only interest is to protect itself. And the only reason it hasn't killed you off yet is because it needs your money to grow.
Yeah. No.
On another note, though, if we haven't already covered it, I am kind of curious to hear your thoughts about the Christian worldview for the Second Amendment.
So the idea that the Christian worldview, right? So I've laid a lot of framework and a lot of base work here, because there is a movement even among Christians that would try to say that a Christian really shouldn't even own a gun, because it's a religion of peace. It's a religion that you're taught to love and not to go toward violence and those kind of things.
Turn the other cheek kind of deal.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Turn the other cheek. That's common usage. That's a term we know, even as a society becoming less and less Christian, because it's so embedded in our frame, in our mindset. So then the question is, well, does the Bible give opportunity for the use of weapons and for ownership of weapons? And you really have to ask the question, why are people given as a fundamental right the ability to own a weapon? And it's for the purpose of self-defense, and not even just self-defense, I would say, because the Bible talks a lot about loving your neighbor, and it talks about how we are to love our neighbor as ourselves. And there's a lot to be said about that, for like, well, you should be generous to your neighbor, you help them in when they're in need, you should bless them in whatever opportunity you're given. But it's something that we don't take into account, that it is just as important for a Christian to defend his neighbor whenever given the opportunity. If there's a madman waving a gun in like a mall, let's say, in the Midwest, and he's firing rounds into a crowd of people, it is a Christian duty at that point, as one who loves his neighbor, to stop that individual. And the use of deadly force in that instance is the greatest act of love that can be given for all of his neighbors that are ducking and running for cover. Like, you have and I say duty, and I don't take that lightly. There's the Jesus said to his disciples that a man has no greater love for his friends than to lay his life down. But to sort of face enemy gunfire in a way to neutralize and bring down that threat, to preserve the lives of your neighbor and all of your neighbors, is an act of profound love. It's dangerous, it's risky, it causes you to put your very life on the line in a way to defend other people. And that I think is the greatest defense, I guess, that you could use. Like, there's things that the Bible talks about, right? Like, I know, Austin, you brought up in our earlier conversation the whole idea of the Israelites who, when they were in captivity in the land of the Persians.
Yeah, my thought on that, real quick, for people who might not be familiar with the story, was the people of Israel who had been captured by the Persians, and long story short, a corrupt official had convinced the king to order that anyone on a certain day would be allowed to go out and kill the Israelites free of charge. That they were a treacherous people, and you could just go out and kill them, no problem. Like, basically like the purge. And one of the biblical heroes, Esther, was able to convince the king that this was wrong, this was wrongdoing, and that he couldn't reverse the law, but he could give the law that the Israelites could arm themselves and defend themselves, and they would not be held accountable for they wouldn't, nothing would be held against them for defending themselves. And so instead of being a massacre against these people, the threat of them being able to defend themselves basically made this, a non-existent threat at that point, because now that they're equally armed, no one wants to fight them.
Yeah, no one
Another
wants
one.
to fight someone that's your size, right?
Yeah, right. It's like, the other thing I think of is, like, if it gets thrown around a lot, and in the gun community, whenever people talk about, if you don't have a sword, go out and sell your cloak to go buy one. I think there's a lot of instances in the Bible where God has told people many times before to defend themselves and to protect themselves and to fight for them. And I think that we've gotten this idea of, like, the whole turn the other cheek thing. But I think that you bring up a good point, that I just kind of want to touch on this about, like, the idea of, like, the gunman in the mall thing and laying down your life for your friends. From a Christian perspective, if you have the ideology that because you believe in God, that if you die, you are going to go to heaven, right? But you don't know that that is the case for everyone around you, whether or not they're spiritual, where they're at, like if they're saved or not from a Christian perspective, then you laying down your life or charging that gunman or doing whatever to stop that, like not only are you, like you said, showing that great love for your neighbors, but if you're the one that bites the bullet, you already know where you're going. You're not condemning others to an eternity in hell if that's what you believe in your belief system. So I think that's a great point that you brought up, is that defending both yourself, your family, and others is the greatest love that you can show other people.
Yeah, and the Bible talks about too. There's a verse in the book of First Timothy that talks about the duty of a man, and it says that a man who does not provide for his own household is worse than an unbeliever, especially those of his household. And there's a there's an aspect of provision, like you should take care of your family financially, but there is also an aspect of that that is protection. Like husbands are called to be protectors of their home and their family. And what do we always say, right? In these silly debates about guns, is it's just a gun is a tool. A gun is a tool that has been designed to neutralize threats, has been designed, yes, it has been designed to go into war and do those things. But at my, like, I'm not a military guy. Like, I'm just a guy that, I have a family, I have a wife and a daughter, and I would protect them with my own life. And to do that, God has blessed us with these tools, that will do so with deadly force, like that will stop an intruder dead in his tracks, that will cause government uh, intruders from cause them to maybe think twice before they try and make a run on their population. Like there's a reason why America continues to still fight back against so much government overreach, and so few other nations have. It's because all of those other populaces have already disarmed themselves. Like, they have willingly laid down their guns, and because of that, the government has no fear of their population. And so there should be a healthy dose of fear, which is why the framers put the Second Amendment in there. Because a tyrannical government that tries to take away the rights of individuals ceases to be a good government. And the only recourse, with it written in your constitution, the only recourse at that point is to overthrow that government, because it has ceased to be for the will of the people. So
Yeah.
there's a lot tied up in this, and so there's a great responsibility laid on us to defend our families and our homes and our communities. And one of the great tools that we've been given to do so is firearms.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, guys, I think this has been really eye-opening for all of us. I think this has been a great conversation. I deeply enjoyed this.
Yeah, honestly, thank you so much for educating me in a lot of ways, and for just taking the time to just talk about your beliefs with me.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to have the conversation, and I think that's really the main takeaway, right? Is we don't, all three of us have the same viewpoint, but we're willing to listen to each other. We're willing to talk through these issues to see where they end up leading, because that's the only way to have a real and honest conversation.
Absolutely. I feel like if more things, more people did it this way, there would be a lot less violence in this world.
I agree.
Been a great conversation. I hope for all you listeners, you enjoyed it as much as we did. Thank you again, everybody, for tuning in to Mid-Tier Thoughts. As usual, social medias and sponsors listed in the description. Thanks for tuning in with this one. Catch you next time, guys.
Hey, you guys have a good one.